What's up, people of the Mojave Wasteland? So this run was suggested to me a while back, and it's time for another adventure for our favorite 10-penny resident, Herbert daring Dashwood. Let's dive right into what we'll be using for this run. Laser pistol and combat shotgun aren't too bad. We can use the GRA laser pistol once we get it for some good old-fashioned weapon modding. And speaking of mods, this combat shotgun is a little different from what you may expect. It sure was for me, and you'll see why here in a bit. But this specific combat shotgun is the result of a mod I'm using. You can find the link to it, as well as all mods I use, in the description below. As for what we wear, well, our pre-war clothing sure isn't going to be doing us any favors as far as protection goes, but hey, that's what we got. And it's the only thing I actually had to console command in, besides getting Herbert's special to where it needs to be. You can actually obtain a laser pistol from Doc Mitchell's metal box, and this real cool combat shotty is located on this stove, along with a bit of 12-gauge ammo. Speaking of special, next up, here's the special allocation. Aside from the slight bonus we get from our dirty pre-war clothing, I'd say we're a bit below average, but we could definitely work with this. Not sure how I feel about Dashwood having 4 charisma. I think he should have a bit more, but hey, charisma is, at best, minimally useful here in New Vegas, so it's no big. 4 intelligence is great because educated and comprehension are awesome perks. Longtime viewers of the show know I love using those. And real quick, our tag skills. Shame that melee weapons is a dud for us, but having small guns, guns in FNV, and sneak is both great and in character. Would have loved energy weapons over melee, but we'll manage, especially once we get the educated perk. For our traits, I went with good-natured and skilled. Good-natured, I figured, made a bit of sense with his pro-ghoul disposition, and I chalk up the penalty to offensive skills and boost to non-combat skills to his age. Feels in character for him, at least compared to the other traits at our disposal. Speaking of in character, you know what it's time for? Setting the scene. In Fallout 3, Dashwood is 70 years old, and we know that FNV takes place 4 years after. Pretty impressive for a man of Dashwood's age to be on an adventure of this caliber, but how is he here? Well, fans of the channel know of our favorite plot device, and it's certainly not getting old anytime soon. One day, while enjoying another day of retirement in Tenpenny Tower, Dashwood heard a most interesting rumor on the radio from good old Three Dog. Good thing someone got that radio station up and running again. Rumors of a mysterious train station, Union Station, have been circulating throughout the capital wasteland, and while most people there take it as, at best, a fun story to speculate, Dashwood is interested. But to leave the confines of what is arguably the safest location in the capital wasteland, well, most people with the luxury of living in Tenpenny Tower wouldn't bother pursuing the idea of tracking down Union Station. But our venerable protagonist is no ordinary resident. After much thought, he takes the contents of his safe, turns in the key to Mr. Alistair Tenpenny, and his first stop is Megaton, not too far away. Luckily for him, there's a band of adventurers who are equally eager to check this Union Station out. And who better to have in your company than a daring, seasoned veteran who might not be as tough as the young'uns, but his knowledge and experience go a long way, and that shows in spades once they reach Union Station. The super mutants and feral ghouls are taken out with minimal casualties, and when the train is up and ready to go, Dashwood does wonder what will become of his home. You see, in this timeline, and for the first time in an FNV run, our protagonist isn't leaving and arriving around the time the events of FNV start. Dashwood leaves around the events of Fallout 3 sometime within, so he truly has no idea what will become of it. He issues a silent goodbye to his deceased friend, the ghoul Argyle. The Lone Wanderer did pay a visit to Tenpenny Tower and gave him news of Argyle's fate. It was nice to see such a young, kind person broker peace between the residents of Tenpenny Tower and Roy Phillips' crew. He's sure that everything is fine, which, well, we know it's not, because we know what Roy does to the residents of Tenpenny Tower, should the Lone Wanderer take the diplomatic route, but alas, our protagonist does not. But because of his thirst for adventure, he is spared that fate. And while we're at it, though it has nothing to do with Dashwood's run, I figured it'd be cool for the sake of context. The Lone Wanderer makes the ultimate sacrifice, making Project Purity a reality, and Sarah Lyons ultimately is the one who leads the charge to take out the rest of the Enclave at Adams Air Force Base. I like to throw her a bone in these stories because Sarah Lyons is awesome, and she was taken from us far too soon. So at least here she can enjoy a bit more glory. And again, Dashwood never learns of this because he knows that his trip, wherever this train goes, is one way. He's not exactly a spring chicken. As you've been watching, we actually started in Good Springs, and Dashwood, after arriving in this settlement with company in tow, who had since gone their own way, was accepted as a resident where he helps out with various tasks. By helping Sunny Smiles with Gecko Patrol and further boosting the morale of Good Springs with stories of his many adventures, our protagonist really is feeling like he's getting back into the swing of things. Leaving Tenpenny Tower, though harder on him, physically and mentally, than he cared to admit, was the right call. He's not at all shy about telling others where he came from, and judging by his accent knowledge of this capital wasteland and the like, the other residents do believe him. Turns out that old train station in Freeside does lead somewhere after all. Up until that fateful night where Courier 6 meets their end fate in these scenarios, Dashwood has become familiar with the powers fighting for dominance in the Mojave Wasteland. As a man who spent all of his life in the anarchic capital wasteland, the idea of these big governing forces is certainly a new concept to him, and I imagine he has a little interest in the Mojave's politics. But what does spring him into action is when our iconic mailman gets 2 in the 10 spot from our favorite charismatic gangster upon the hills of Good Spring Cemetery. Dashwood takes it upon himself to find this hooligan and right this wrong. Why? Because it would make for a grand adventure. See, Herbert is a neutral karma character, and while we'll almost certainly become good as per our actions, mostly due to the fact that FNV likes to boost our karma from silly things like killing Kenturians at Hoover Dam, we can still play upon this neutrality. Herbert Dashwood is a man who lived an entire life of thrills and adventure. Back home, he was relatively famous, and a person like him seeks adventure in the name of glory and the rush that comes with it. Sure, he does feel bad for the Courier, but having no personal ties to them, Dashwood's quest to hunt down Benny is one driven by the thrill of adventure, so kind of an ego thing. If he is able to get justice for this Courier, that'll only make him more famous across the Mojave. And honestly, that gives us a lot of fun ideas to work with for this run, because outside of the obvious Legion, no faction is off the table for us. That said, our protagonist is 74 years old by the time his self-proclaimed final adventure, in giant air quotes, begins. He does have a second motivation in play, and knowing the fate that befell his longtime friend Argyle, Dashwood's final adventure is also a nod to his former manservant, as he called him. If only he could see this strange, interesting new world. Before trailing Benny, however, Dashwood decides to practice his sneaking just like he used to back at Tenpenny Tower. And what better place to try that than Cazador Valley? Those of you who have been with the channel for a good while now might recognize where this routing is from, and the particular series I developed it for. And hey, if not, be sure to check out my FNV Faction Warriors playlist where I took units from Fallout 3, courtesy of Tele2 Wastelands, and ran them here with a set of rules very different from what I usually do on here. Those of you who have enjoyed this series will be happy to know that we'll be running vanilla New Vegas units in 2025, so stay tuned. And I figure the Fallout 3 version is good where it is. The difference here is that we don't have Logan's Loophole nor Day Tripper, so we really gotta make the most of the stealth boy we have to use up. The real great part of this is that it provides very early access to Red Rock Canyon. If you don't get the stealth boy from Good Spring School, you can either pickpocket Joe Cobb or kill him for his. Either way, I love this little shortcut. And while we're at it, if our daring protagonist is going to go after this hotshot in New Vegas, what better way to warm up than to take out one of the bosses of the notorious Fiends? While we snipe Queenie and let Cook do most of the work for us, let's talk a bit about this combat shotgun. See, I didn't realize this going into the run, but it fires a lot faster, and I wasn't ready for that at all. Not only that, but because this is not some special item, like the Courier Stash-style Talon Pack I used in our FNV Lonesome Road Talon Company Merc run, but an item that can be found anywhere, it's also an item that can be wielded by our enemies. In fact, in my experience in this mod, a lot of Fiends really seem to like this weapon, and I can hardly blame them. It's really strong, has an incredible rate of fire, way faster than what we're used to in Fallout 3, so this was a pleasant little surprise. In this particular exchange, however, it didn't get too much action because, well, Cook did most of the work for us, and he was so low on health that Dashwood is able to take him out and seize all of the glory for himself. So, because Herbert is trailing Benny, we'll be visiting all the same places, and of course that leads our daring protagonist to the town of Primm. This is a common destination for us here on this channel, and this run is no exception. After all, we're essentially playing detective with a hint of vigilantism, a form of justice Dashwood certainly would be no stranger to in the capital wasteland, where factions like the Regulators thrive. And as usual, the Bison Steve isn't really that tough, being that it's basically the intro dungeon of the game, but we do take a bit more damage than I was expecting, and that makes sense because we have absolutely no protection. Unlike against Cook, when we have to take on enemies ourselves, we're going to be real careful due to how frail we are. That said, we deal a lot of damage, and once we bump up our weapon skills, energy weapons and guns respectively, we'll fully embrace being a glass cannon. And Stayback is definitely going to be worth taking this run. I don't think we've actually taken that at all on any of our runs, so hey, this will be a first. Shotgun build, let's go! And hey, once we rescue Beagle, we are immediately able to reinstall Law here in Primm. Dashwood goes with this because he remembers the Protectron bartender from Tenpenny Tower. There's another chapter in the grand Mojave adventure of Herbert Daring Dashwood complete. Following the trail of clues, the next big stop here is Novak, and when it comes to dealing with the ghouls, once he meets up with Jason Bright and the non-feral ghouls here, Dashwood of course would help them out. I can see him also lending aid to Harlan as well, so hey, it's about time we didn't kill him in one of these runs, right? But since our protagonist is of, shall we say, venerable age, well, I think that going through this stealthily is the way to go. And because of his experience against the super mutants while making his way to Union Station, he's gonna know that he alone is not gonna have much of a chance against these Nightkin. Not too different from the super mutants back home. And all we have to do to end this peacefully is kill the jailer, which we can kill a certain number of Nightkin before Davison will just become hostile to us. So taking out the jailer, getting the key, and then finding where Harlan's friend is enough to let Harlan allow us to go upstairs peacefully, or we can get the information regarding the stealth boys, report back to Davison, and though he's upset, we are being honest with him, and he does understand this. I gotta tell you too, man, going through this stealth style was really awesome and pretty scary, man. I remember the first time I came to this place when I played New Vegas for the first time, and yeah, gotta say, atmosphere is excellent. It's just you against a bunch of enemies you cannot see. No pressure. Unfortunately for us, we also go unseen by our enemies. And after that, of course, we help set the rockets off so that Jason and the Bright group can go ahead and make their way to the Promised Land. Then when we return to Manny, having helped out the ghouls and gotten them out of RepCon regardless of how we go about it, we get the information needed and move on. And of course, that next stop for us is Boulder City, where we have to settle a dispute between the Great Khans and the NCR, because the Khans have NCR hostages, and the lieutenant has been ordered to just say that they're expendable and open fire anyway. Herbert Dashwood is going to make a heroic entrance inside and try to defuse the situation peacefully, and he does, thankfully, because I like to think that Dashwood is rather silver-tongued. And playing upon Lieutenant Monroe's integrity, the lieutenant agrees, and hey, perfect resolution here. We're accepted with the NCR and liked by the Khans. And hey, we're not done with the Fiends just yet, because this time around, in the next chapter of Dashwood's exciting final adventure, he is accompanying a group called the First Recon to go hunt down another notorious Fiend boss named Driver Nephi. Acting as the bait to lure them out for the snipers to do most of the work. Why, that sounds like something exciting to tell people. I imagine the First Recon would think that this old man is absolutely insane for attempting this, but hey, he pulls it off, and I gotta say, 10 of Spades once again dome shots Driver Nephi in this run, and I swear that guy has not forgiven me for how mean I was to him in our Tuco Salamanca run. Oh, and don't forget to go back to Lieutenant Gorobitz whenever Driver Nephi is taken out. That way you can get an extra 300 bottle caps. In Dashwood's case, he bet 300 bottle caps he'd be the bait and survive, so yeah, he won. And that's not all. This time we are going after Violet. Now, I typically do go after all of the Fiend bosses here, because in these runs, they are, well, pretty great for experience points, loot, all that good stuff, and NCR reputation whenever we want to take it. And remember earlier when I said that I was not used to this shotgun? I was so not ready for how much faster it fires. Yeah, that's on full display here. And now I kind of like that, though, because I can attribute my clunky gameplay to actually fitting in character for Dashwood, you know, considering his age and the fact that because of that he's not going to be as quick on the draw. It kind of actually works out, and I absolutely love it. And I gotta say that the model for this combat shotgun is gorgeous in my opinion. With the 3 outside Fiend bosses taken care of, let's go after Motor Runner, and I had an absolute blast with what we're about to do here. See, being that he's 74 years old, Dashwood knows that it's unlikely he'll survive if he goes up against the Fiend solo. Can't bring the First Recon here with us, unfortunately, so falling back on his many practice sessions of sneaking, that practice is put to the ultimate test. And even better, because, well, Dashwood decided that trying to help out the Great Khans and help them turn over a new leaf would also make for exciting story material. We're helping them out as well. So that means we can take advantage of the Great Khan disguise and just walk on in and do what we need to do with Motor Runner. We can complete Jack and Diane's quest as per the mission they gave us, but after that we can kind of do what we want to. And I always love doing this because it's just kind of hilarious, because taking advantage of the disguise mechanic and making the fiends friendly to you, or you can pass a 60, I think, in a speech check to get in. You can basically assassinate Motor Runner and then just walk out the door. That said, we do have to worry about the fiends on the way out of Vault 3, so we're going to use yet another stealth boy and make our way out. Once we're done, we can report back to Diane, get our payment, and then move on. But where are we going to go exactly? We are being neutral up to this point because we haven't helped Camp Forlorn Hope, and we won't in this run for a change. Figure to spice things up a little bit. But that doesn't mean that we can't fight the Legion in some way. Helping out First Sergeant Astor, and of course, helping out with the irradiated troopers, because that's something Dashwood would do. Making use of another locksmith readers, I got mine from the concourse building at Camp McCarran. And it's about time that we actually save the Winters family. Dashwood paid them 150 bottle caps after posing as a traitor. 150 bottle caps they'll never use. Hearing tales of a dastardly nightkin leading a nation, quote-unquote, one Yatobitha, Dashwood takes it upon himself to track down this rascally rapscallion and take them down once and for all. I mean, hey, he's got the stealth boys to spare, and he did just... Technically, he assassinated Motor Runner. That's going to be great storytelling. So I imagine that his logic is the same here. When we make our way to Rhonda, his idea is initially, hey, I'm going to reprogram this Mr. Gutsy to help me fight Tabitha. And boy, does that decision end up just going in a direction he does not expect. Not only does this result in a peaceful disbandment of the nation of Yatobitha, but Herbert Dashwood finds someone he was not expecting, a companion, a ghoul companion at that, introducing the new manservant, Raoul. It's pretty great that we actually get to focus on Raoul for one of these character challenges. I also did a run in Fallout 3 where I played as Raoul. I want to check that out. But basically, Raoul's character quest is whether or not he has come to terms with his lot in life, and as we go and meet more older folks out here in the Mojave Wasteland, specifically Ranger Andy, Corporal Sterling of the 1st Recon, and then Loyal at the Boomers. I have to wait till a little bit later before we talk to him. Raoul opens up more and more about his past life, and the conclusion of Raoul's quest has two decisions, and those two decisions affect Raoul greatly, as well as the player, because the player inherits a perk from Raoul so long as Raoul is in the party. And I think that Dashwood is actually the perfect ally for Raoul, because like those three characters I just mentioned, Herbert Dashwood, well, we already know that he's old too, and he is currently fully embracing his own lot in life, coming out of retirement for one final grand adventure. I can actually see Raoul and Dashwood hitting it off almost immediately, especially because Raoul calls the courier boss, and because he'll be calling Dashwood boss, and the manservant title, well, I'm sure Raoul would have a sarcastic quip for that, but at the same time, he probably wouldn't mind it all that much, especially because Dashwood is so pro-ghoul. Definitely a refreshing change of pace for our favorite mechanic, and just seeing Dashwood go about his life, wanting the final chapter of his life to be a grand epic one, I can see Raoul really getting behind supporting this guy. And I like to think that as Raoul is opening up more and more about his, honestly, really tragic backstory, that Dashwood will be doing the same, opening up more to him as well, and talking to him about Argyle, his experiences with ghouls. I like to think that Dashwood has actually been to Underworld at some point. Combine Dashwood's enthusiasm, sympathy towards ghouls, as well as the conversations with the three aforementioned characters, I can see Raoul's confidence being skyrocketed. Now, I think you know where this is already going, but again, we have to wait until we talk to Loyal because we haven't been to Nellis yet. We're trying to go in order as much as possible. So before we can tackle that and conclude Raoul's quest, we gotta head to New Vegas to track down Benny and take him out once and for all. And the first task for Herbert Dashwood and his manservant Raoul is to liberate the citizens of Freeside from the oppressive NCR. Yeah, I see Dashwood going this route. Pretty much the same reasons as Sims. I don't see Dashwood having quite the hardened opinion of the NCR that Sims might have had back in the Lucas Sims run. Should also check that out, really fun. But because Dashwood has actually been here for 4 years, he's well aware of the NCR's ineptitude. Though I don't think he's without sympathy for them. They have done a lot of good despite that. Still, just not the faction I think he would support here in the Mojave Wasteland, which... The idea of influencing the politics of the Mojave Wasteland hardly comes to our protagonist's mind, and then when he approaches Swank, turns in the evidence, and Swank is initially a little skeptical because it's an old man trying to tell him this wacky story, but then when he presents evidence and adds that he is the legendary Herbert during Dashwood that's been going on the Mojave Wasteland for 4 years, Swank's like, oh, okay, yeah, go ahead, take out Benny. He's a fink anyway. Trying to do Mr. House dirty like that after he did so much for our tribe. And, well, the legend of Herbert Dashwood even gets the attention of Kaisar, and, well, we know how this song and dance goes, and those of you who've been with the channel for a while now know that I like to get my science up to 55. With comprehension, we can completely shut down security here. Yeah, we don't have the repair to deal with the sentry bots, but we don't have to worry about them because they're not hostile to us. And, well, before we can go to the Boomers, do their quests, and complete Raul's character quest, yeah, he's practically a legend himself in these runs. I bet he's excited for his own character challenge that may or may not be coming in the future. But anyway, in case you don't know, it's our pal, J-Boy. And, well, why does Herbert Dashwood take him out? Well, because J-Boy tries to swindle Dashwood, and Dashwood ain't about to let that happen. Dude, I seriously guffawed when J-Boy exploded like that. I actually forgot that I took Bloody Mess. I took it at level 6, but I always forget that I have it. Just make sure that you take it after you dispatch the 3 fiends outside, because Bloody Mess proccing will ruin their heads. I mean, understandably, right? Anyway, we get through without much of a problem, and now we can talk to Loyal, and hearing more about him as we help to raise the bomber and all that good stuff up. On top of everything else we talk to Loyal about, that inspires Raul to approach his new friend Dashwood one more time and tell the final chapter of his own story, and I don't see anybody ever replacing Argyle, but Raul, he's a dang good manservant. No, a wonderful friend out here in the Mojave Wasteland. And I do believe that Dashwood, being pro-ghoul as he is, his disposition towards them would only be strengthened by the time he spent bonding with Raul Tejada. In hindsight, I wish that I had Raul help out at Tenpenny Tower and meet Dashwood. That would have been a real fun full circle, but I wasn't even thinking about that at the time. And when it comes time for Raul to ask what he should do, because he's trying to come to terms with his lot in life, and he ends up deciding that with all the conversations he's had with Herbert Dashwood, as well as Dashwood's own enthusiasm and confidence despite his venerable age, Raul does decide to take up the path of the El Vaquero. And when Raul makes this revelation, naturally, Dashwood is receptive to this notion. He wants his new friend to fully embrace himself, to be the best man that he can be, because Dashwood knows that Raul is great, and now it's time for the rest of the Mojave Wasteland to know that Raul Tejada is indeed great. And hey, because our sneak is high and we're able to get our laser pistol inside of casinos, we can actually battle Big Sal and Nero, as opposed to the pretty funny thing I usually do whenever I have to try to get around the fact that we can't sneak our weapons in. Thanks to Dashwood outsmarting Big Sal and the fact that El Vaquero Raul Tejada is there, yeah, they're easy pickings. On to the Brotherhood of Steel. I think that Dashwood would actually be receptive to House's ultimatum here, because even back out in the Capital Wasteland, the much, more lenient, we'll say, Lion's Pride, even they had a shoot-on-sight policy, which did extend to non-feral ghouls, and considering how hardcore these guys are, yeah. This time around, I opted for the Ranger Dobson route, and considering that Herbert Dashwood had an explosive collar cuffed around his neck, I'm sure that didn't help his disposition towards the Brotherhood of Steel. Good riddance. Next up, House sends Herbert Dashwood to help protect President Kimball, and after pickpocketing this redundant detonator and then bringing it to Ranger Grant's attention, well, looks like our daring protagonist has a very exciting chapter to add to the final tale of his life. Before going to El Dorado Substation, I do make sure to grab the NCR engineered jumpsuit in the locker adjacent to the visitor center, because we can slap that on and then make our way inside, therefore turning the NCR from hostile to neutral with us because we look like one of them, apparently. Alright, it's time for Dashwood to make his daring entrance into Hoover Dam, and because in addition to helping Mr. House secure dominance over the Mojave Wasteland, this is really going to put our protagonist's skills to the ultimate test, and I decided to keep Raul back because not wanting to lose another friend like the way he lost Argyle, And wanting Raul to actually enjoy his life as the El Vaquero, Dashwood said that it would be best for him to remain in Freeside, just in case there were any legionaries who may have decided to be brazen enough to attack there. Help out the followers of the apocalypse while you're at it. And pay attention to our health. The fights here are really, really difficult. Thanks to our plethora of hotkeyed healing items, we're able to somehow out-heal the barrage of fire from the Kentorians and the Prime Legionary. Having emerged victorious, we can go ahead and make our way to the control area, where we are accosted by a pair of NCR heavy troopers. And thankfully, Dashwood does know who Colonel Moore is, again, due to his time here in the Mojave Wasteland, so he's able to craft that little lie to get them to leave. He installs the override chip, and then makes his way to the switch that Mr. House tells him to go to, takes out a couple of Prime Legionaries along the way for good measure, and because they would, kill us otherwise. He hits the switch, and it's time to go back outside. Now, although the boomers have helped us and dropped the Kentorians' health by quite a bit, I am still worried considering how much damage we took. The fact that they're not one-shots with our laser pistol despite their poor health is also a bit concerning, but thankfully we got a bunch of Securitrons to help us out here. And I gotta say, the animation where they get fried from a laser weapon never gets old. As we make our way to the Legates camp, fortunately for us, our Securitron Mark IIs are fairly competent, although that doesn't stop us from taking a pot shot or two ourselves. Once we're inside, we are gonna have a fun little battle with this Praetorian here, and oh man, it's just... Despite Herbert Dashwood apparently having 4 luck, he's been pretty lucky this entire run, I have to say. And perhaps attempting the most daring thing, well, no perhaps, definitely the most daring stunt he's ever pulled in his entire life. Dashwood is going to attempt to talk down the Butcher of the East and tell Atlantis, hey, there's actually a lot more to the east. I'm the real legend of the East, the legendary Herbert Daring Dashwood, fool. Oh, and he does put up a pretty convincing argument. Combine that with the fact that Dashwood was so bold, I think that Atlantis would actually be like, huh, alright. Though Dashwood probably won't be around by the time Atlantis comes back for round 2, and as for General Oliver, yeah, I can see Dashwood just straight up flexing all over that guy. An epic bluff check is passed, and we've won. That was a fun little run, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely a more lighthearted, fun adventure, and I decided to just go all out with that. Had a lot of fun with it. Thanks again for the suggestion. I had an absolute blast with this run. I figured I'd throw Atlantis a bone too. We beat him up here enough on this channel. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you at the next episode.